Clint Eastwood sat across from Jimmy Kimmel, his weathered hands resting on the arms of the guest chair, eyes sharp and unyielding. The audience's applause from the intro had barely faded, and Jimmy, cue cards in hand, leaned forward with his trademark grin. "Clint, you're a legend. Movies, directing, even some political moments. What's the secret to staying in the game this long?" It was meant as an easy lob, a way to warm up the Jimmy Kimmel Live crowd. But Clint didn't bite. He tilted his head, squinting. "In the game?" he said, voice low, deliberate. "I don't play games, Jimmy. I tell stories. Problem is, folks like you sometimes forget what stories are worth telling." The crowd chuckled, expecting playful banter. Jimmy laughed too, but his fingers tightened on the cards. "Oh, come on, Clint," he said, leaning back. "You're saying I don't know a good story? We've got plenty here, maybe not Gran Torino level, but we try." The audience laughed again, but Clint's face didn't crack. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, gaze locked on Jimmy. "You call those bits you do, poking at people's lives, turning them into punchlines, storytelling? That's not a story. That's noise." The laughter faltered, replaced by murmurs. Jimmy's smile held, but his eyes flicked to the control booth for a split second. "Noise, huh?" he said, voice still light but sharper now. "Well, that's what keeps the lights on, Clint. People love a little noise. Even you've made some loud movies." He winked at the crowd, expecting a cheer to break the tension. It didn't come. Clint's jaw tightened. "There's a difference," he said, slow and measured, "between loud and true. You want to talk about my work? Fine. But don't act like your cheap shots are the same as building something real." The audience shifted, some whispering, others leaning forward. A producer in the back mouthed something to the director, who shook his head. Jimmy's grin wavered, but he doubled down. "Cheap shots? Clint, it's comedy. We poke fun, we move on. You should get that. Didn't you once tell a chair to shut up at a convention?" The crowd roared, the loudest laugh of the night, but it was sharp, uneven. Clint didn't flinch, his eyes narrowing. "That chair," he said, voice like gravel, "had more to say than half the stuff you put on this stage." Gasps mixed with laughter. The crowd split between shock and delight. Jimmy's face froze, his smile a mask. He'd expected a light sparring match, something to clip for viral tweets. But this was Clint Eastwood, 94, unscripted and unafraid. All right, Jimmy said, raising his hands, trying to pivot. "Let's talk about your new film, Juror Number 2. Sounds intense? Tell us about it." But Clint wasn't letting go. He leaned back, crossing his arms. "I'll talk when you stop dodging. You want to throw punches, Jimmy? Fine. But don't cry when someone swings back." The audience erupted, half cheering, half stunned. Phones were out, recording, tweeting, the internet already buzzing. Jimmy's laugh was forced, his eyes darting to the clock. "Swinging back, huh? Well, folks, looks like Clint's still got that Unforgiven vibe." He turned to the camera, desperate to pivot. But the tension was alive, crackling like a live wire. Clint sat calm but unyielding, while Jimmy's hand trembled slightly on his desk. The control room was silent, a network exec muttering under his breath. Social media was lighting up, and this was just the start. As the band kicked in for commercial, the stage felt smaller, the air thicker, and everyone knew this wasn't banter anymore. It was a fight, and Jimmy was already on the ropes. The commercial break ended, and the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage lights snapped back on, bathing Clint Eastwood and Jimmy Kimmel in a glow that felt more like a spotlight than a welcome. The audience, still buzzing from the first round, leaned forward, phones poised, sensing the air hadn't cleared. It had thickened. Jimmy adjusted his tie, his grin returning but tighter, like a man stepping back into a ring he hadn't planned to fight in. Clint sat unchanged, his steely gaze fixed, hands resting calmly on the chair. "Welcome back, folks," Jimmy said, voice bright but brittle. "We're here with the one and only Clint Eastwood, and, let's just say it's getting lively." The crowd laughed, but it was cautious, waiting. Jimmy flipped a cue card, eager to regain control. "All right, Clint, you called me out. For noise," he said, air-quoting with a smirk. "But let's talk about your noise. You've never shied away from controversy. Those political speeches, that RNC chair moment. You stir things up too, don't you?" It was a calculated jab, meant to flip the script and paint Clint as the provocateur. The audience murmured, some clapping, expecting Clint to dodge. He didn't. "Stirring's fine," Clint said, voice low, unhurried. "But I don't hide behind jokes, Jimmy. When I say something, I mean it. You? You toss out barbs, then duck behind it's just comedy. That's not stirring. That's dodging." The crowd gasped, then cheered, the sound swelling unevenly. Jimmy's smirk faltered, his fingers tapping the desk. He'd planned to pivot to Clint's politics, banking on the audience's love for a juicy soundbite. But Clint's words landed like a gut punch, exposing the gap between Jimmy's polished quips and raw conviction. "Dodging?" Jimmy said, forcing a laugh. "Clint, I'm right here, taking it. But let's be real. Your conviction has ruffled feathers. Like that time you backed a candidate who got slammed for shady deals. You didn't dodge that backlash, right?" The crowd roared, sensing blood. Jimmy leaned back, thinking. He'd scored. Clint's eyes narrowed, but his voice stayed steady. "You want to talk choices? Fine. I back who I believe in, and I stand by it. Win or lose. You want to dig into my past? Go ahead. But you don't get to sit there cherry-picking while pretending your show's just fun. You've got a platform, Jimmy. People listen. And when you mock their struggles, their jobs, their towns, for laughs, you're not just joking. You're dismissing them." The audience went quiet, then erupted, some shouting agreement, others stunned. A woman in the back whispered to her friend, "He's not wrong." Phones lit up, tweets flying. "Clint just schooled Kimmel." Jimmy's face twitched, his plan unraveling. He'd meant to bait Clint into a defensive rant, something editable into a viral gotcha. Instead, Clint turned the mirror on him, and the reflection wasn't flattering. "Dismissing?" Jimmy said, voice rising. "Clint, we lift people up. We talk about real issues, healthcare, workers, every night." He pointed to the crowd, desperate for cheers. They came, but weaker than before. Clint leaned forward, unblinking. "You talk at issues, Jimmy, not about 'em. Last week you mocked a town in Ohio, factory closed, folks out of work. Got a big laugh. Did you call those people? Ask what they're facing? Or was it just a setup for your next ad read?" The studio froze. A producer in the booth dropped her pen. The audience didn't laugh now. They shifted, uncomfortable, some nodding. Jimmy's eyes widened, caught off guard. He'd referenced that Ohio town in a monologue, a throwaway line about nowhere towns that killed in rehearsals. He hadn't expected Clint, of all people, to know or care. "That's not fair," Jimmy said, voice tight. "It's comedy, Clint. We don't call people up for every joke." Clint shook his head. "Maybe you should. Might learn something, like what it means to respect the people you're laughing at." The crowd roared, split down the middle, half cheering Clint's raw honesty, half loyal to Jimmy's charm. Social media exploded. Kimmel tried to dunk and got dunked. A stagehand whispered to another, "This is bad." Jimmy's hand clenched his cards, his smile gone. He'd miscalculated, thinking he could outmaneuver a legend with a quick jab. Now the stage felt like quicksand, and Clint wasn't budging. "All right," Jimmy said, voice strained. "Let's cool it down. Tell us about juror number 2, Clint. That's why you're here." But Clint crossed his arms. "I'm here because you asked me, and I'm answering. You don't like it? That's on you." The tension was a live wire, the audience hanging on every word. Jimmy's producer signaled to wrap, but the cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the unraveling. Clint sat back, calm as stone, while Jimmy's laugh sounded hollow. The internet was already tearing the exchange apart, and this was only the second round. As the band queued up, signaling another break, the stage felt like a battlefield, and Jimmy's comeback had just blown up in his face. The Jimmy Kimmel Live stage snapped back to life after the break, the audience's energy a mix of anticipation and unease. Clint Eastwood sat like a monument, his gaze steady, hands resting calmly on the chair. Jimmy Kimmel, his grin now a thin veneer, shuffled his cue cards, his eyes darting between Clint and the crowd. "We're back with Clint Eastwood, folks," he said, voice strained but pushing for cheer. "And wow, it's been a night already." The audience laughed, but it was jagged, sensing the storm hadn't passed. Jimmy leaned in, determined to claw back control. "Clint, you've got some strong opinions about comedy, but let's talk impact. Your films, tough, gritty. Some say they glorify violence. Doesn't that send a message too?" It was a bold swing meant to put Clint on the defensive and shift the narrative. The crowd murmured, some clapping, expecting a heated rebuttal. Clint didn't blink. "My films," he said, voice low, cutting through the noise. "They show life. Raw, messy, real. I don't glorify anything. I show what people face, what they overcome. You want to talk messages, Jimmy? What's the message? When you mock a nurse working double shifts, calling her town a punchline? You think that's harmless?" The audience gasped, then roared, split between shock and agreement. A man in the third row nodded, whispering to his wife, "He's right." Jimmy's face tightened, his plan backfiring again. He'd hoped to pivot to Clint's controversial filmography, banking on a safe debate about art. But Clint turned it personal, calling out a specific Kimmel monologue from weeks ago, a throwaway gag about a rural hospital's struggles that had sparked online backlash but faded quickly. Or so Jimmy thought. "That's not what I do," Jimmy said, voice rising, hands gesturing. "We highlight issues, Clint. That nurse? We raised money for her hospital on this show." The crowd cheered, but it was half-hearted, sensing the dodge. Clint leaned forward, eyes like lasers. "You raised money after you got called out. Don't act like it was your idea. You laughed first, apologized later. That's not impact. That's damage control." The studio went quiet, the weight of Clint's words sinking in. A producer in the booth whispered, "He's killing us." Phones lit up, tweets surging. Clint Eastwood just dismantled Kimmel on live TV. Jimmy's jaw clenched, his composure cracking. He tossed his cards on the desk, leaning toward Clint. "Damage control? Clint, I'm out here every night, talking to millions, trying to make sense of the world. You make movies, great ones, but you're not in the trenches like this. You don't know what it takes to connect." The audience clapped, but it was scattered, loyal fans trying to rally. Clint didn't budge. "Connect?" he said, voice like steel. "You don't connect by laughing at people's pain. You connect by listening. Try it sometime. Might surprise you." The crowd erupted louder now, some standing, cheering Clint's raw conviction. Jimmy's eyes widened, realizing he'd stepped into a trap. He'd gone for a knockout, accusing Clint of being out of touch, but Clint flipped it, exposing Jimmy's reliance on easy laughs over empathy. Desperate, Jimmy tried. One last jab. "Listening? Clint, you're preaching, but your own record's not clean. That empty chair stunt, people said it was tone-deaf, divisive. You didn't listen to that backlash, did you?" The crowd gasped, expecting Clint to falter. Instead, he smiled, a rare, thin smile that sent chills. "I said what I meant." Jimmy took the heat, didn't hide. "You? You'd have made a joke about the chair and moved on. That's the difference." The audience exploded, cheers and gasps colliding. Social media went wild. Kimmel tried to burn Clint and got torched. A stagehand muttered, "This is a train wreck." Jimmy's hands shook, his voice hoarse. "All right, Clint. You win the Tough Guy Award. Let's talk juror number 2. Give us something positive." But Clint crossed his arms. "I'll talk when you stop spinning. You wanted real? You got it. Deal with it." The tension was unbearable, the stage a battlefield. Jimmy's producer signaled to cut, but the cameras stayed, capturing every second. As the band queued up, Jimmy's laugh was hollow, Clint's gaze unyielding. The internet was ablaze, and Jimmy's gamble had just set the stage on fire. The Jimmy Kimmel live stage pulsed back to life after the break. The audience a live wire of anticipation and tension. Clint Eastwood sat like granite, his eyes locked, on Jimmy Kimmel, who gripped his desk, his once easy grin now a ghost. "Welcome back, folks," Jimmy said, voice cracking under the strain. "We're with Clint Eastwood. And, well, it's been a ride." The crowd laughed, but it was nervous, sensing the endgame. Jimmy flipped a cue card, his last chance to steer the ship. "Clint, you've made your point. Comedy's tough, I get it. But let's end on a high note. Tell us about juror number 2. What's the heart of this film?" It was a desperate pivot, a plea to move past the carnage. The audience clapped, hoping for calm. Clint leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate. "The heart? Truth, Jimmy. People fighting for what's right, no matter the cost. Something you might not get when you're too busy chasing laughs at folks' expense." The crowd gasped, then roared, split between shock and awe. Jimmy's face fell, his plan crumbling. He'd begged for a softball, but Clint swung hard, tying the film to the fight unfolding on stage. "That's not fair," Jimmy said, voice shaking. "I care about people. This show, we give voice to the little guy every night." Clint's eyes narrowed. "Voice? You give 'em a punchline, Jimmy. Last month, you mocked a teacher striking for better pay, called her picket sign cute. You think she felt heard?" The studio froze. A woman in the back whispered, "He saw that?" Phones lit up. Tweets, surging. Clint's calling out everything. Jimmy's jaw clenched. He'd forgotten that bit. A quick gag that got laughs, but sparked a small Reddit thread of outrage. He hadn't expected Clint to know, or wield it like a blade. "That was one line," Jimmy snapped, hands flailing. "You're acting like I'm the bad guy here. You've made choices too, films, politics that hurt people. Don't lecture me about impact." The crowd roared, some cheering Jimmy's defiance, others booing. Clint didn't flinch. "I've made choices," he said, voice like steel. "Stood by 'em, took the heat. You? You hide behind 'it's just a joke' when folks call you out. That's not a voice, Jimmy. That's a cop-out." The audience erupted, standing, shouting, some chanting Clint's name. A producer in the booth muttered, "We're done." Jimmy's eyes darted to the control room, his hands trembling. He'd tried to fight back, to paint Clint as hypocritical, but Clint's raw conviction turned the stage into a courtroom, and Jimmy was losing the jury. Desperate, Jimmy went for broke. "You want truth, Clint? Fine. This show's about honesty, calling out the absurd, the powerful. Like when you backed policies that gutted small towns. You want to talk cop-outs? Look in the mirror." The crowd gasped, expecting a knockout. Clint smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "Policies? I backed what I believed, right or wrong. You don't like it? Say it straight. But don't sit there mocking those towns for laughs, then act like you're their hero. Truth hurts, Jimmy. Try facing it." The studio exploded, cheers drowning out gasps. Social media went nuclear. Kimmel's toast. Clint's a legend. Jimmy's face went pale, his voice gone. He'd bet everything on flipping the script, but Clint's words cut deeper, exposing the gap between Jimmy's polished activism and real accountability. The band queued up, but Jimmy didn't move, staring at his desk. Clint sat back, calm, unyielding. The cameras caught every second, the internet already dissecting the meltdown. As the show cut to black, the fallout began. Clips went viral, crossing 5 million views in hours. In a Chicago diner, a waitress told her coworker, "Clint didn't just win, he spoke for us." In Atlanta, a bar played the clip on loop, patrons debating, "Is Kimmel fake?" The next day, Jimmy's team scrambled, issuing a statement about passionate debate. It didn't land. Hashtags surged. Even Jimmy's fans wavered, posting. He looked scared. Clint stayed silent, letting the moment speak. Talk shows dissected it, some calling Jimmy out of touch, others praising Clint's grit. In a Texas barbershop, a customer said, "That's how you talk truth. No yelling, just facts." The moment wasn't just a fight. It was a shift. People weren't just watching. They were thinking, who's really listening to us? Jimmy went quiet, his next show subdued, while Clint's juror number 2 trended, tied to his stand. The culture had moved, and truth, spoken plain, had won.